Welcome aboard, everybody, and a happy Friday. We're talking NBA basketball today as we are marching our way towards the playoffs. I got my big playoff hat on, right? That's where we're going, baby. We're going to the playoffs. We've clinched the playoff spot. Now, where the heck we'll be seated, I'll discuss with our NBA insider extraordinaire. You see him right there in the other box. It is Sean Deveney from Heavy Sports. And by the way, we are presented today by Northeast Roofing Professionals. Today's video brought to you by our friends at Bayberry Automotive, and we'll hear more from our sponsors in just a little bit. Good afternoon, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Lurch?
Well, all right. I mean, the playoffs are approaching. I am kind of relieved that we are getting close to that place, Sean. But before we even start talking about that and all the seeding, let's talk about some of the big news and notes this week from the NBA. And the biggest piece of news coming down just last night, Luka Doncic pulling up lame, and it looks like a hamstring issue. MRI today, so we don't have all the deets, but did not look good as they were taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder last night in what was kind of a, take a look, a measuring stick kind of game for the Lakers, who have played very well here on the back end of the season, and it was a massacre. But the worst thing of this is not the massacre, Sean, but what happened to Luka Doncic and what it could mean for the Lakers. Let's discuss.
Yeah, he's been fantastic since the All-Star break. They're averaging about 35 points with a little more than 7 rebounds, 7 assists, shooting the ball very, very well. We've seen his progression over the course of this season where he really, as they got healthier as a team, they played a lot of the year without Austin Reeves, and then they played a lot of the year without LeBron James as well. And then when they finally all came together, I think a lot of people were wondering, okay, well, what's this going to look like? Are there going to be enough basketballs for all three guys? They've really figured it out, and they were 16-2 over an 18-game stretch, and then this happens. And, now you've really got to question, just how far this team can go. The West is so stacked that if Luka were to miss even a couple of games early on in a first round series, is this a team that can get to the second round, dealing with something like that? And we don't even know, we don't know the grade of this hamstring injury. If it's bad enough, we might not see him till May. And if we won't see him till May, we might not see the Lakers in May. So, not a good situation for a team that had, just such good, vibes, as the kids say. This was really just a devastating night. You mentioned the loss. That's one thing, and that's not something to just gloss over. But certainly losing Luka was, that was something that can really torpedo where this team thought it was going to go.
Yeah, and I think one of the things in watching the Lakers in recent weeks, Sean, that I've observed is just watching LeBron James evolve into a, quote, role player, all right? It kind of accepting his role, understanding that Luka is going to lead the way here, but I can still contribute mightily in my own way. And LeBron seems to have that kind of, dare I say, balance very, very well, which doesn't happen a lot of times with superstar players. I remember the back end of Carmelo Anthony's career, and I was always like, come on, man, just play a role. Stop trying to be the lead dude. And he just couldn't figure it out until it was almost at the very, very end. LeBron has figured it out. He seems to have found that way to still contribute mightily, especially when it matters, but then to be able to conserve during the course of the rest of the game and allow some of the star players on the Lakers to be stars.
And he seemed to be liking it. He seemed to be, kind of growing into that over the last month and a half that he was being asked to do that. And of course, we didn't get a chance to see it, like I said, because everybody's been injured. They've never really had all three guys, Austin Reeves, LeBron, and Luka, healthy at the same time. And as long as that's the case, it's tough to, figure out what your roles are going to be because you just don't have everybody there. So, LeBron definitely, it's interesting because if you go back, Rich Paul on the podcast that he does now with Max Kellerman was talking about this probably about 2 months ago, where he said to LeBron, you could be like just a Karl Malone. Just go out there, set some tough screens, rebound a lot, be tough, and you'll find a way. You find your way to 20 points a game. You get a bunch of rebounds, and you're setting up everybody else. And when you look at it, that's kind of what LeBron has been doing lately. He does set some really good screens. I mean, you look at him. Nobody wants to fight through that screen. And he can throw his weight around. He's certainly still plenty athletic. gets out in transition. This is an under reported fact about LeBron, is that he's one of the best. I think he's got the most points in transition this year at 41 years old. So, he still can do so many different things. That was one of the nice things about, as you say, watching them over the last couple months, is that he's really grown into this role and seemed to be enjoying it as well.
Some good news in the East, or so it seems, at least for the Detroit Pistons. Latest reports out of Detroit, maybe about a week or so to perhaps the return of Cade Cunningham. They obviously had to have him back here in the playoffs to make any noise. They remain the number one seed, and they are going to be able to hold that number one seed. Let's discuss that.
Did they need him back? I don't know. Because Dennis Jenkins
pretty well without him, haven't they?
He's taken. Here's a G League guy, just an absolute great advertisement for the way the NBA has set up the two-way contracts and the G League and all that stuff. Dennis Jenkins last year, G League guy. This year starts off as on a two-way contract and plays well enough to where they say, okay, well, we're gonna change you to a more permanent contract, a regular NBA standard contract. Then Cade goes down, and this kid's been fantastic. And you're right. I mean, look, I'm not saying that they don't need Cade Cunningham, but he's really held up. And I think this is something you'd rather have it be, a twisted ankle or something rather than a collapsed lung. But it's something where this injury might benefit this team, that they've seen that they can do it without Cade Cunningham, that they can play pretty well without Cade Cunningham. And B, when you do get him back now, even you can really look at the minutes that they're going to play with both Cade and Dennis Jenkins on the floor now. That's something they didn't really have before. They need as many. They're such a great defensive team. They need as many offensive weapons as they can get. And I think this is a kid now that they trust a lot more than they would have, even just a month ago. So, obviously, look, nobody wants to hear collapsed lung. But as far as injuries go, this is one that might benefit them when we get to the playoffs.
Sean, let's talk a little about the playoffs versus the regular season. It's something we've discussed a lot, but now that it's almost upon us, we do want to assess teams in the NBA based on how they've played during the season. And certainly there is some merit in doing that. But the playoffs are a different animal, and we do see changes in teams, even philosophically in terms of effort, come the playoffs. So how much should we read this season into the teams that may not be in first place or even second place that still could be the one that come out of their league or their conference, I should say? Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it is tough because I think, you look at the Pistons, and no matter what happens to them in the playoffs, they took a leap this year. There's no question that they took a leap this year. They could wind up in the Eastern Conference Finals. They could wind up in the semifinals and get knocked out. And you'd still say, look, this is a team that, 2 years ago was 14 wins. They make the playoffs last year, and then they proceed, and then we'll see where they go from here. But you get teams that have been sort of bumping their head against the wall a couple of years, and what happens in the first 82 games it really doesn't matter. I think the Knicks are obviously in that category, so we can look at where they're seeded, and that doesn't matter. If they were the number one seed, it wouldn't matter. If they were the number 6 seed, it wouldn't matter. They've got to show us in the playoffs. They've gotten to a point where they've got to show us. Cavaliers, same thing. They've got to show us now in the playoffs. It's enough of aren't you a nice story? You've won, 55 games. You've got to do something in the playoffs. And I think that is something that happens with a lot of teams. The best teams, do play different. And what they are able to do, I think Oklahoma City is a good example of this. If you go back to last postseason, the Denver Nuggets ran a zone against the Oklahoma City Thunder pretty much that whole series and almost won that series. That was a 7-game set. That was a tough series.
Right down to the wire.
Exactly. Right down to the wire. And it was basically because Oklahoma City could not handle that zone defense. Well, Oklahoma City figured that out in that series. This year, you see teams throwing zone at Oklahoma City. It was happening last night against the Lakers, and Oklahoma City's figured it out. And so they've taken things that teams do against them, and they've used it in the 82 games to get better so that when they see it in the playoffs, it's not going to be as much of a problem. I think that's what the best teams are able to do here with these 82 games. That teams that are just sort of happy to be here and happy to be at 50 wins, they're not quite there yet.
I think something that may be already decided, Sean, there's only a handful of games left, is the MVP. We've been talking about it over several weeks here, even at the halfway point of the season. Who's it look like? Did that showdown last night, that demolition by OKC, pretty much put Luka to bed? Put Alex,
also at 64 games.
If he wasn't already at the top, clearly at the top. I know it's probably between him and Wembanyama, but I still have to believe that at this point, SGA is the best player in basketball. And
I think that, look, even if Luka were to come back and to get his 65 games and all that, that even with that,
it's not enough.
It would not have been enough. And look, it's an 82 game award. It's all 82. And you can say the same thing about Wembanyama, that he's been terrific since, look, not that he wasn't good to start the year, but he's been terrific since January 1 or so, maybe a little earlier than that. But really, Shea has had to do it all year. And we talk about a lot of injuries with a lot of teams. We don't talk about them enough with Oklahoma City. They were hurt pretty much all year. I mean, Jalen Williams has been hardly in there. He's played something like 30 games. And when he's been healthy, he's dealing with this hamstring issue that really hasn't been, very conducive to him playing like himself. So, I think when you look at the whole picture, it's hard to see. I think when we get to March, a lot of times people want to find a different candidate and make it interesting. I don't think it's that interesting, man. I think it's been Shea pretty much since game one, and it will be him at game 82.
Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital at MC Show Digital, our YouTube handle. Don't forget to like the video and also hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. We are presented by Northeast Roofing Professionals, and this video brought to you by our friends at Bayberry Automotive. Sean, when we come back, I want to talk about my Knicks. And is there any reason for hope, or should we be hanging our heads and hiding our faces in our hands? We will discuss when we return. It's more with Sean Deveney, our NBA insider. Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital. Be right back.
Finding the right local roofing company can be tricky. You don't want to hire the wrong roofers, or you could end up spending a fortune on repairs. The pros at Northeast Roofing Professionals can ensure your home is protected by a strong and sturdy roof. Locally owned and operated, over 30 years experience, free estimates, and competitively priced. Don't settle for an inexperienced roofing contractor. Turn to Northeast Roofing Professionals. Discounts for military and first responders. Reach out and let them put a sturdy roof over your head. NERPCNY.com. NERPCNY.com.
Trust is everything when it comes to auto repairs. At Bayberry Automotive, they take trust seriously. Bayberry has a team of experienced and certified mechanics that are dedicated to providing exceptional customer service. And Bayberry stands behind its work with an exceptional 5-star rating from its many satisfied customers. Family run, integrity in everything. Bayberry Automotive, BayberryAutomotive.com.
Located on Route 57 across from Bayberry Plaza, the premier choice for auto repair in Liverpool.
All right, we are back. Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital at MC Show Digital, our YouTube handle. If you want to subscribe to the channel, this is where you want to do it right there. YouTube.com/at MC Show Digital. And don't forget, if you're already a subscriber, you can just like the video. Membership's available as well on our channel. So get a hold of a membership and help support the channel in an even bigger way. So feel free to do that as well. We're talking with Sean Deveney. We're going inside the NBA here on a Friday afternoon. Sean, let's talk a little bit about my New York Knickerbockers. I must admit, I'm not feeling all that well these days about the way this team's been playing recently, the comments that they're making about we got to get this right. This isn't the time of year to be figuring things out, Sean. This is the time of the year where you're supposed to have it all figured out and you're supposed to be ready for the playoffs. It just doesn't feel as a Knick fan like my team is ready. So I'm hoping they can flip that switch. But, man, I'm a little concerned, I must admit. Give me your level of concern. Is it red alert, or what is it for you on the Knicks?
Yeah, I'm at DEFCON 4, I think. Okay. Probably not quite at 5 yet. But, there's a lot to be worried about. And I don't think the schedule has helped them. They've played so many cupcakes in the last 2-3 weeks here that I think it's allowed them to mask some of the problems that they know are there, that Mike Brown knows is there, and that anybody's watching this team night in and night out can see. So the fact that you're playing Indiana or Utah or whoever it might be, you wind up, you can kind of overlook that because you get the win, but they're not playing the way they should be. I think you've got this $175 million starting five, and it just doesn't fit together. And when you look at the pieces, it all should work, but it just doesn't. And they've been so reluctant to make a change to that. I think that's one of the big problems. I think that Bridges should probably be on the bench at this point, coming off the bench, and not that that's a demotion necessarily. It's just what they have going is not working. So you put him on the bench and let him make that impact coming off the bench and have a better role player in there. Because like I say, you've got 5 guys and you're paying them so much money and they're all used to being either number 1 options or number 1A kind of thing. And it's just hard to feed that many mouths. A guy doesn't get enough shots and that becomes a big story. And then the other guy doesn't get enough shots and that becomes a big story. I think it's all sort of feeding on itself at this point. I think they'd be much better off if they were playing some tougher teams, and they will over the last few days. We'll see how that goes. If other teams play their best players, that'll be something to watch as well. But yeah, to me, it's really been about the starting 5. And that's been a real issue for them. You look up every game, it seems like, and they're down, 15-4, and it's just like every game you got to come back.
Terrible starts. Yes. Miles McBride is back, which I thought would be maybe a nice shot in the arm for a team that could have used it, but he hasn't really played well since he's been back. He's been rusty. And I think it just leads to this question, Sean, about Mike Brown and what he's going to do with this Knicks rotation, because Jose Alvarado certainly has been a key contributor since he's come over. Now you have McBride back in the fold, a guy that was a proven guy and was a very meaningful player to the Knicks last year. You've got Landry Shamet, who has, when healthy, shined a little bit. They're really going to have to figure out how many guys they're going to play and who's going to play. I just wonder what Mike Brown is going to do about all that come playoff time. Again, that's not the time to be tinkering. That's the time to be set on your rotation and let's go.
Yeah, and that goes back to why I thought that one of these guys should have been in the starting 5 at this point, and you have somebody else coming off the bench, because some of your biggest holes are answered by the role players who are on the bench. But by the time you get to the role player on your bench, like I say, you're down, 10, 15 points. They have a lot of trouble stopping the ball. They're not great at point of attack defense. That's why they got Alvarado. But he's coming in and he hasn't been great shooting the ball. But they're also, by the time he gets in and is able to impact the game, they're already down. And so they're trying to climb back. So that's a guy that you could be starting Mitch. Obviously that's tough with who else they have. But that's something they'd have to consider is you need that level of defense. If you look at the last couple of months, it's really been the defense that has been very, very disappointing, which hadn't been the case at the beginning of the year. So, they've got role players, I think, who can answer the call and fill in some of the holes that they've shown. But the thing is that requires you to probably start one of those guys. And they just haven't shown the foresight to do that. And it's a little bit late now to go ahead and change the starting 5. It's something that they probably should have done a month ago.
You mentioned good defense, Sean, and I think when it comes to the playoffs, I think defense during the regular season is always underrated. And then when it comes to the playoffs, it needs to be there. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think OKC is just going to run away with this thing, because they're just tremendous defensively. Yes, they have the best player in the league in SGA, and they have some real offensive chops. But the fact of the matter is their defense is phenomenal. And defense travels in the playoffs. You've got to have that if you're going to win consistently in the playoffs. Talk about that, and who are the teams that you think possess that element that could get them all the way to the finals?
Yeah, I mean, and I think part of what you need to be successful in the playoffs is you need guys who you don't have to hide defensively. You can afford to hide one guy defensively. in the playoffs. If you've got two guys and you're trying, that's one of the problems with the Lakers. For instance, you've got to hide Luka and you've got to hide Austin Reeves as well. And it's just tough to do that because you can't really hide it. NBA teams will find a way to pick you apart if you're doing that kind of thing. So you need guys who can play. That's one of the things about the Celtics is Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are both very good defensive players. Maybe not great defensive players. I think Jaylen Brown's a little bit better, but Jason Tatum's no slouch on the defensive end, and so they don't have to hide him. They don't have to be untrue with their switches and all that stuff. You don't have to have a whole other plan where the other team is targeting one guy. So I'd say the Celtics are very much like that. I think the Cavaliers actually have a lot of that in them. Where they do have to hide James Harden, but other than that, I think that they've got enough guys to make that up. So even though they haven't been a great team in the regular season, I think they're more dangerous in the playoffs. I think Philadelphia has that capability as well when they're healthy, which they haven't been, but they've been lately. And you're starting to see. I mean, if Paul George can play well, and you've got Maxey and Embiid's out there, that can be a team that, like I said, they don't have to hide a lot of players, and that's very, very important. When you get to this time of year, out west, I would say obviously Oklahoma City and San Antonio probably lead the way there. We've seen that all year. I think Minnesota is another team that's like that as well, though. When they're healthy, they don't. There's not a lot of hiding that they have to do defensively. So that's a team that's maybe a little lower down in the standings, but I think has a higher ceiling when they get to the playoffs.
Sean, generally, when we're talking about players in the NBA, we're talking about players among the leaders and among the teams, the elite teams. But there's one guy I want to mention today. I don't even think we've talked about him at all this year. But wow, what a tremendous rookie season he's had. The kid from Duke, Con Knippel, who set the 3-point record for the Charlotte Hornets franchise just the other night. And Charlotte has really turned it around. They're going to be a playoff team this year. The Knicks have seen them recently and got beat by them. Give me a thought on a youngster like that I don't know that a lot of people really had on their bingo card to have such an immediate impact in the NBA, and he certainly has.
And I think even if you go back to January or so and you said, well, who's going to be the rookie of the year, it would have been Cooper Flagg. You would have just naturally thought it's going to be Cooper Flagg. But you've seen the way that this team has played and what a difference maker he can be. Obviously the shooting has been off the charts, and that was sort of the book on him, was that he was going to be able to be a good shooter at the NBA level. But I don't think anybody really saw what a complete player he was, because he did have to sort of play off of Cooper Flagg last year at Duke. When Flagg was hurt, he played very well. I think that did help his draft stock and got him drafted as, I believe it was number 3 with 4 with Charlotte. You've seen that pay off is he can play defense. He can pass the ball. I mean, he's a very, very good passer. Even if he's not necessarily racking up the assists, he's just one of those guys that moves the ball to different players and makes everybody better that way. And then he's so dangerous as a shooter. So, I certainly did not see him being as good as he's been. It's really been quite a surprise, and they're a surprise team. If you get into the thing where you're looking at, okay, teams down the bottom of the East, and who do you really not want to play? Look at what Charlotte's done since January or so. They've been fantastic offensively, defensively as well. And that's just the kind of team you don't want to go out there and grind against in a 7-game series. They're going to make it tough. They might not win a series, but they're going to make it tough on whoever they play.
Yeah, no question about it. Hey, if you're the Knicks these days, Sean, since Boston's going to be the 2, Detroit's going to be the 1. Now the question is who's going to be the 3, and the Knicks have a chance to fall down to the 4 because there's just 5 or 6 games left, but there's just a game separating them and the Cavaliers, so that could flip. And as you mentioned, the Knicks do have a couple of tough games here down the stretch of this season. Do you want to be the 3 or do you want to be the 4? You want Boston early if you're the Knicks, or do you want to deal with Detroit earlier theoretically? I mean, I don't like any of it, to be honest with you, but which position would you rather be in?
Well, I'm worried about round 1 here. Okay, I think you got to worry about round 1, and I think if you're I think you're much better off being in the 4 at this point. because I'd rather play Atlanta. They've played very, very well, but I think they're beatable. I think that there's been a lot of sort of youthful enthusiasm behind the way that they played, and that's great, but that doesn't carry over to the playoffs. I think they'd be a much tougher out. I mentioned that the Sixers, if they hold on to number 6, do you really want to face guys with that much playoff experience and,
right.
Who haven't been together really all year, are pretty well rested because they've been hurt all year. Philadelphia, that's not a series I want in the first round. So, if I'm the Knicks, I'm happy to slide down to 4, play Atlanta. Obviously no Trae Young, so it's a much different series than what we've seen in the past. So, I'd much rather be there. And then you get Detroit in round 2. Presumably, and look, if I had to play the Pistons or the Celtics, I'll take the Pistons at this point every day, and that's nothing against the Pistons. It's just the Celtics are that much more experienced and have played that much better, especially lately. So I don't see a real problem going down to number 4 if I'm the Knicks at this point.
Okay, so we ought to Dallas Maverick it up and tank. Okay, it's time to tank.
Yeah,
4.
Yeah.
Tanking.
Just like a week of tanking.
Good grief, a week of tanking. Oh, Lord. Well, this is what it comes down to sometimes in the NBA. Sean, always good chopping it up with you, my friend. By the next time we talk, probably the seeds will be pretty much decided. We're getting ready. We'll be ready to talk seriously about playoff basketball and matchups. Thanks as always, my friend. Good to chat with you.
Thanks, Larry.